All right, let's bring in Congressman Pat Fallon, Republican from Texas, member of the House Armed Services Committee, a good person to talk to in a situation like this. Congressman, thank you so much for taking the time. What are you hearing at this point tonight?
Yeah, Rob, I mean, it does look like that Putin's going to go in with a full-scale invasion. I think it's ironic that Putin, what did he call it exactly? A special military operation?
Yeah,
it sounds a lot like maybe perhaps a minor incursion, which Joe Biden might have given a green light for accidentally by being foolish on the international stage.
Right.
This is because of Biden's wokeness and his weakness that he's been projecting since he took office, and especially during the debacle in Afghanistan. And unfortunately, I'm not surprised. I signed on to a letter back in October urging the president to send lethal aid to the Ukrainians back then, and he dragged his feet, and that is completely inexplicable.
Yeah. I mean, there's no question that there have been countless mistakes in potentially dealing with this before it happened. And the fact they just were always, it just felt like we were always a day late, like with the Germany thing. Oh, Germany's okay with the pipeline thing? Okay, now we'll jump on that. And they changed everything before that press conference yesterday. I mean, that was so humiliating to watch. What do you imagine? I mean, when you look at a situation like this, and I asked the same thing a few minutes ago, when you've got a country like Russia that's trying to tell the people of Ukraine that you belong to us and that your government is fake, you can't go in there and just bomb the heck out of Ukraine. You just can't do that. So how do you conduct a military operation where you take over a country, but you don't damage it and you don't hurt the people? I mean, that's tough, especially when their military has every intention of fighting back.
No, Rob, you're exactly right. And just for your listeners and viewers as well, we need to outline some background. I mean, Putin was asked last year if the Ukrainians and the Russians were brothers. And he said, we're not brothers. We share the same soul. Yep. He's never really looked upon the Ukraine as an independent country, although, 2/3 of the Ukrainians now want to integrate into Western Europe and would be more than happy to join NATO. And it's very interesting that 20 years ago, the other Eastern European countries, Poland, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Hungary, Czech Republic, and the rest, saw that they feared a resurgent Russia, and they asked to join NATO. NATO didn't approach them because they saw what was on the horizon. What we've seen with Putin is a pattern. He stole 2 provinces from Georgia in 2008. He stole the Crimea from the Ukraine in 2014. But he did nothing, interestingly enough, in the 4 years of the Trump administration, because I really, truly believe President Trump, he had fear. He feared President Trump and what he might do because he was constantly projecting America first strength. And then, lo and behold, as soon as President Trump gets out of office, he starts up again. And now we're looking at a full-scale, the largest land invasion in Europe since World War II.
Congressman, stand by for us if you could. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back. Stay tuned. Joining me now, we're going to go back to Texas Congressman Pat Fallon just for a second. Obviously, a lot has changed in the 5 minutes since we talked to you, sir. Watching this all go down at the UN right down the street has been something else, too.
Yeah, Rob, it's, unfortunately, it comes as no shock because, as I said before, he has a pattern. I really thought that there was a possibility. I think the way this may play out is a lightning strike. I don't know if he'll take Kiev or not, but certainly he'll take the rest of the Donbass region and possibly even the entire Black Sea coastline, and then declare victory and hope that the world, well, they'll punish him for a few weeks or a few months, just like we did in 08 and 14, and then there'll be just a semblance of normalcy again, and he'll get away with it. This time, this has got to be, a line in the sand, because isn't this eerily similar to the Sudetenland? I mean, just even some of the language that the Russians are using, protecting ethnic ethnic civilians and things like that. And we knew how that ended, and we have to stop this guy once and for all.
Something else. It is something else. Congressman Fallon from Texas, thank you so much for joining us tonight. We appreciate it. So we're going to go back to Congressman Pat Fallon now, state of Texas, member of the House Armed Services Committee. I've been to Ukraine. I've been to Kiev. I remember going to this country and trying to figure out exactly how it worked, which is what I do when I often travel. And you find this post-Soviet country and city that it had all the drab markings of the Soviet Union, but it just had that little bit of flair as they were just trying to figure out how to live a Western life. And you kind of saw. You just saw these little flares of how they were gonna move along and become something good, and they were gonna move away from the Soviet Union, but it had all that drab still wrapped around it, and you had people that drab feeling of communism, of coming out of decades of just having no hope and living just this mundane, hopeless life, and you think about how they've felt for the last, what is it, since the 90s, since they came out of this thing, and to the idea that they might have to go back under. I mean, obviously, it's not a communist country anymore, Russia, but it's still offering the same just terrible life, if we're going to be honest, that it always has. And you really got to feel for the people, don't you?
No, Rob, absolutely. And, you look at some of the success stories of Eastern Europe. You look at Poland, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Czech Republic, Hungary, and some others. And they've really come such a long way in 30 years. And when you go and visit, as you said, I noticed that the young people in some of the Eastern European countries were a lot like Westerners, Americans. They would smile, they would laugh, they had hope.
Yeah.
But people that were older, 60, 70-year-old or older, their lives had been stolen because they didn't live, they existed. And the Ukraine had a particular challenge because they still had so much Russian influence. And there's some people in the Ukraine, of course, that sympathize with Russia and would rather be ruled by Putin. But overwhelmingly, nearly 70% of the country wants to integrate into Western Europe, and they want to integrate to the international community, and they want to become a part of NATO. It's that more the older generation, some of them would still gravitate toward Russia. But we have to do everything we can to hold firm and tell this fella, all he is an international bully, and stand up to him and be an unrelenting and crippling sanctions. He'll hear that.
If you were to transform into the president tonight and you have to deal with this, what's the first move you make?
I'd have some cognitive function. And the first thing I would do, I would address the American people. I would have done that a few hours ago and told them this is exactly what we're going to do. And quite frankly, Rob, it's what he should have done 2 months ago, which was deny Russia access to the SWIFT, the electronic international banking system. That's the biggest stick in our arsenal, and he hasn't done it yet. I don't know why now that a full-scale invasion is launched. Had he done it sooner, it could have acted, possibly, we'll never know now, as a deterrent. And I would also address Putin directly. Stare into the camera and say, this will not stand. We will not go back to normalcy. We'll not go back to, just like we did with Georgia in 2008 and the Crimea in 2014, where we get mad at you for a few weeks or a few months and then all is forgiven. This time, the line in the sand has been drawn. You've just invaded a sovereign country with a full-scale invasion. Thousands, if not tens of thousands of innocent people are going to die, and the international community cannot stand for it any longer.
I think that they feel like they've got this leverage, and they're betting that it's whatever is going to come to them is going to come temporary, and I think they feel like the world needs energy and they've got it, and that means they can do whatever they want. You saw what happened when Germany made that big move, when the new prime minister there, Scholz, said that okay, your pipeline's gone now, and then Medvedev fired right back on Twitter saying, okay, well, I hope you guys are ready for whatever the hell he said, 2,000 euros for however many cubic meters of probably liquefied natural gas or whatever energy they were talking about. But it was basically more like, you think you're going to do something, you're going to pay more, and we all know how that's going to go. So, you know what? This is our game now. You depend on us for energy. That means we can do whatever we want, and there's nothing you can do about it. You can sanction us for a few months, and you can do this and that. At the end of the day, you need what we have, and you're going to let us do this.
Yeah, well, Germany really put themselves into a box by catering to the left and saying that they're going to be carbon neutral by a date certain. I think it was 2040 or 2050. Yeah. And they're taking their nuclear reactors offline. I think France, their nuclear reactors accounted for 70 to 80% of their domestic electricity. So for Germany to do that when they don't have vast natural resources of natural gas and clean coal and oil like we do in the United States was really something that was very incredibly short-sighted, and it wasn't in their national interests. And now they're in a box. But what the United States and Canada should be doing right now is working on and should have done it again months ago. Biden's been in office for 14 months, so he has to own this, coming up with a comprehensive alternative for energy for Western Europe and our allies, to give them that flexibility and that freedom of movement so they're not dependent on evil regimes like Putin's Russia.
It is something else. Let me read you, sir, the statement from President Joe Biden on the phone call he had with Ukraine's Zelensky tonight. President Zelensky reached out to me tonight, and we just finished speaking. I condemn this unprovoked and unjustified attack by Russian military forces. I briefed him on the steps we are taking to rally international condemnation, including tonight at the United Nations Security Council, which we watched here live on Newsmax, and that was a joke. He asked me to call on the leaders of the world to speak out clearly against President Putin's flagrant aggression and to stand with the people of Ukraine. Tomorrow, I'll be meeting with the leaders of the G7 in the United States, and our allies and partners will be imposing severe sanctions on Russia. We will continue to provide support and assistance to Ukraine and the Ukrainian people. You talked about very, very severe sanctions. I don't think most people understand really what a sanction does or how impactful it can be. Can we completely... I mean, they have a lot of money sitting in the coffers. They can go for a while, even if you sanction them, even if they have nothing coming in. Can't they survive for quite a while and be healthy?
Well, Russia doesn't have the debt that the United States has, which is interesting. But they have a very small economy. They're very reliant on energy. Yeah. And one of the key mistakes that Joe Biden made when he first came into office was canceling the Keystone XL pipeline. America's energy independence gave. I talked to Secretary Pompeo just about this, and he said our energy independence gave him so much flexibility on the international stage because, as you said before, Rob, a lot of countries wanted what we had. And so if we drove down the price of energy, that would hurt Putin because this is what funds all these adventures in the first place. And denying him access, because we are in a global economy, and that's undeniable. And can the Russians even feed themselves? So there's a lot of things that they need to import as well. And without Western Europe and the United States, can China, and that's why he's been maneuvering closer to China and Xi lately, but can they provide him everything he needs? They're certainly going to try to backdoor that, but then we can also impose penalties on China. So we've got to bring our manufacturing base back to the United States. I think that COVID exposed our weaknesses there. Okay. And, flex some muscle and be the world leader again, because the world will be a very dark place if China and Russia have hegemony over this planet.
You think China makes some kind of move in this moment?
I hope not. I mean, the one thing that Taiwan has in its favor is 100 miles of ocean. And, there are 23 million people. One thing that a lot of people don't know, Rob, is the last year of President Trump's administration, the Chinese communists flew about 330 sorties into the Taiwanese defense zone. They do that to test Taiwan and to wear out their pilots and their planes and, spare parts, things like that. Well, in the first year of the Biden administration, they flew nearly 1,000 of those sorties, 3 times the amount. They're testing Joe Biden, and they're like the lion licking their chops, looking at a wounded antelope.
Crazy. Well said. Well said.